Okay, picture this for a second. You're sitting at your kitchen table on a completely ordinary Tuesday night, and you log into your brokerage account, not because anything exciting happened, but purely out of habit, kind of like peeking into the fridge even though you know nothing new showed up in there. You glance at the numbers. Contributions this year, around $6,000. Growth this year, $11,000. And you just sit there for a moment, genuinely stunned, because the math doesn't quite compute. Your money made more money than you did by actually putting money in. That's a strange thing to say out loud, but it happens to more people than you'd guess. And if it hasn't happened to you yet, it eventually will if you stay in the game long enough. I'm Dan, and I spend far too much time thinking about money, about the odd psychological turning points where your relationship with your own finances quietly shifts, and about why some people cross this invisible line years ahead of others, even when they started out earning similar incomes. Here's the thing, there's a moment, and it lands differently for everyone, where your portfolio stops being this passive little side project you feed every payday, and starts becoming something closer to a coworker, a silent one that never takes a break, never asks for a raise, and somehow ends up outperforming you. And once you see that moment clearly, once you actually grasp the mechanics driving it, it changes how you look at every dollar you save going forward. It changes how patient you're willing to be. It changes what wealthy even means to you. So in this video, we're digging into what really happens once your investments start paying you more than you're contributing, why it happens, roughly when it tends to happen, what it actually feels like, and honestly, the mistakes people make right before and right after they hit that threshold, because a lot of people get close to this moment and then, out of fear or impatience, blow it. I don't want that to be you. Let's start with the obvious question. What exactly is this moment? People in finance sometimes call it the crossover point, and honestly, I think that label undersells how strange it feels when it actually happens to you. Here's a simple way to picture it. Say you're putting $500 a month into your investments, roughly $6,000 a year. In year one, your account might grow by, $400 from market returns, basically nothing. Your contributions are doing nearly all the heavy lifting. You're the one pushing the boulder up the hill. But keep going. By year 5, your account is bigger, so that same average return is now generating, say, $2,000 a year in growth. By year 10, maybe $5,000. And at some point, and this is the part that sneaks up on people, the growth line crosses above the contribution line. Your money starts earning more in a single year than you're physically putting in. That's simply compounding doing what compounding does, but there's something almost emotional about watching it unfold in your own numbers instead of on some textbook chart. For years, saving felt like the whole engine. You were the engine. And then one day, quietly, without any announcement, your portfolio becomes the engine and you're more like the fuel, necessary fuel, sure, but no longer the only thing moving the car forward. Why should you care about this? Because most people quit right before this point. They look at years 3 and 4, see modest growth, and think, this isn't working fast enough, and they either stop contributing or get impatient and start chasing riskier bets to speed things up. But the years right before the crossover are always the least exciting. That's simply the nature of the math. Early compounding looks flat, almost insultingly flat, and then it bends upward later in a way that looks almost unfair. The practical takeaway here is simple, though people resist it constantly. Track your contributions against your growth separately every year. Most brokerage apps let you see this, or you can log it yourself in a spreadsheet. Once you can literally see the line where growth starts outpacing your deposits, those discouraging years make a lot more sense, because you know exactly what you're waiting for. Now, let's talk about why this crossover point lands at wildly different times for different people, because it's honestly not just about how much you earn. Everyone's heard the snowball metaphor for compounding, right? The little snowball rolling downhill, picking up more snow. It's a fine analogy, a bit overused, but I want to add something to it. The snowball isn't really made of snow, it's made of time. The length of the hill, meaning how many years you let it roll, matters more than how hard you throw the snowball at the start. Here's a comparison, and this is where it gets a little uncomfortable for people in their 30s and 40s. Someone who invests $200 a month, starting at age 22, is very likely to hit their crossover point, where growth exceeds contributions. Years, sometimes even a full decade, before someone investing $600 a month who doesn't start until 35. The person contributing more is doing everything right by conventional wisdom. They're saving 3 times as much every month, and they can still lose the race to time. That's not exactly fair, and I don't love saying it, but it's true, and pretending otherwise doesn't help anyone. Why? Because compounding needs laps around the sun. It needs the returns from year 1 sitting there generating their own returns in year 2, and those generating returns in year 3, and so on. No contribution amount fully substitutes for that stacking effect. It's less like filling a bucket and more like planting a tree. You can't rush a tree into being 20 feet tall by watering it extra hard for 1 week. It simply needs seasons to pass. Now, if you're listening to this at 38 and feeling a bit queasy, let me be clear, this isn't a reason to give up. It's a reason to start immediately, because every year you wait is a year the tree doesn't get to grow. The lesson isn't, it's too late for me. The lesson is that the cost of waiting another year is far higher than people assume, because that lost year would have compounded for decades, not just for 1 year. And I think that's exactly why the phrase, "it's never too late to start," gets tossed around so casually, almost like a bumper sticker, when it really deserves far more weight than that. It's true, but true in a specific way. It's never too late to start the clock, but starting later does mean accepting a smaller snowball at the bottom of the hill, or accepting that you'll need to throw more snow at it along the way to close the gap. Neither of those is a tragedy, but pretending time doesn't matter, pretending contribution amount alone can fully erase that gap, that's the part that sets people up for disappointment down the road. Let's get a bit more personal for a second, because the psychological side of this genuinely interests me more than the math. People describe the first time they noticed this crossover in strikingly similar ways. There's this odd mix of pride and disbelief. Some feel almost guilty, like they didn't earn this money. The market simply handed it to them. I've heard people say it feels like cheating, which I actually find kind of funny, because no, you didn't cheat, right? You paid the price of patience for years while everyone else spent money on things that felt better in the moment. But there's also a strange discomfort that comes with it, and nobody really talks about this part. Once your portfolio starts generating serious money on its own, some people get nervous. They check the account more often. They get anxious during downturns in a way they never used to, because now there's real money on the line, not just contributions they could mentally file under savings I haven't spent yet. Losing 10% of $15,000 feels completely different from losing 10% of $150,000, even though the percentage is identical. The zeros get heavier. This matters because a lot of people, right around this exact stage, make an emotional decision that costs them years of progress. They panic sell during a downturn because the dollar amounts finally feel real to them. Or on the flip side, they get overconfident and start taking on way more risk because, hey, clearly the portfolio is working, so why not push it harder? Both reactions come from the same place, the emotional shock of watching your money behave like it has a mind of its own. The advice here is almost boring, but it works. The moment you notice your growth outpacing your contributions is exactly when you should be reviewing your risk tolerance and asset allocation, calmly on a normal Tuesday, not during a market crash when your amygdala is running the show. Decide in advance how you'll behave when the portfolio drops 15% in a month, because at some point it will, and you want that decision made by calm you, not panicked you. Here's something that surprises a lot of people once they cross this threshold. Your relationship with contributing changes. It sounds small, but it isn't. Before the crossover, putting money in feels like the entire point, the whole show. You feel the sacrifice every single time, right? Skipping the vacation, driving the older car a little longer, packing lunch instead of grabbing takeout again. Every dollar you contribute feels heavy because it's carrying all the weight of your future growth. After the crossover, something shifts. Your contributions start feeling more like topping off a tank that's already mostly full and running on its own fuel. You're no longer the sole reason the number keeps climbing. And strangely, this can make people either more relaxed about spending, which is fine in moderation, or almost obsessive about protecting what's been built, because now there's this nagging sense of not wanting to mess up something that's finally working. I think the healthiest way to view this shift is realizing your contributions are now doing a different job than before. Early on, contributions are the primary growth engine. Later, they become more like an insurance policy against bad market years, a way to keep dollar cost averaging into dips, and a way to keep your habit sharp even though the portfolio could technically coast for a while on its own. You're not less important, your role just changed. Kind of like a parent whose kid grows up. You're not doing everything for them anymore, but you're definitely still showing up. The practical takeaway is to resist the urge to stop contributing once growth starts outpacing your deposits. That's honestly one of the most common and most expensive mistakes people make. They see the account growing nicely on its own and think, I can ease off now. But continued contributions during this phase are exactly what protect you during the rough years, and they're also what keep the compounding math scaling instead of stalling out. One more thing I want to get into because I think it quietly kills people's motivation more than almost anything else, comparing your crossover point to somebody else's. You'll see it online constantly. Someone posts their portfolio hitting 6 figures at 26 or their dividends covering their rent at 31, and it's easy, almost automatic, to feel that little sting of, why isn't that me? But here's what those posts almost never show you. The starting income, the family help, the specific market years they invested through, the debt they didn't have, or the debt they did have and simply left out. Your crossover point depends on so many personal variables. Your income, your expenses, when you started, what you invested in, what the market happened to do during your specific stretch, that comparing your timeline to a stranger's is a bit like comparing 2 different rivers and asking why one reached the ocean faster. Different lengths, different terrain, different rainfall. It's not really a fair comparison, and it never was. What actually matters, and this is the part I genuinely want you to take away, is your own trajectory relative to your own starting point. Are you further along than you were last year? Is the gap between your contributions and your growth narrowing over time, even slowly? That's the number worth watching, not some stranger's highlight reel. And here's a small, almost silly habit that helps with this more than you'd expect. Stop checking your portfolio against the internet and start checking it against a folder. Literally keep a simple note. Once a year, same month, same day. If you can manage it, write down your contributions and your growth for that year. That's it. No comparison to strangers, no comparison to market averages, just you against you, 12 months apart. Over enough years, that small annual habit becomes its own kind of proof, a paper trail showing you in your own numbers exactly how the crossover happened, rather than relying on some fuzzy memory of when things started feeling different. So let's bring this back together. The moment your portfolio starts paying you more than you invest isn't some magic trick or secret formula only certain people figure out. It's simply time and consistency quietly compounding in the background while you go on living your life, going to work, making dinner, worrying about normal stuff. It happens slowly, and then, much like the crossover math we've been discussing, it happens all at once in a way that can genuinely catch you off guard the first time you notice it. And look, whether you're years away from that moment or already living in it, the emotional part matters just as much as the math. Don't give up during the flat, unremarkable early years because those years are doing more work than they appear to. Don't panic when the numbers finally feel real enough to scare you a little. And please don't measure your timeline against somebody else's highlight reel because you're not running their race, you're running yours. Honestly, I think the most beautiful part of all this is that it rewards patience in a world constantly begging you to be impatient. Every dollar you leave alone today is quietly negotiating on your behalf for years you haven't even lived yet. That's kind of wild if you actually sit with it. So wherever you are on this timeline, keep going, keep feeding the machine even after it starts feeding you back. Your future self is already thanking you for it, even if you can't hear it yet. If this shifted how you think about your own numbers, stick around, because that's exactly the kind of thing we dig into around here. And if you found this valuable, drop a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.